Good evening, everyone. You're joining us just a few minutes before 6:30. We are getting ready for our Ask a Planner, the Orbit virtual night here. We're just coming on live ahead just to test everything, make sure everything sounds okay, looks okay. Probably not the most entertaining television right now, but we are just getting ready here and making sure everything is looking and working well. So bear with us and we'll be ready to go in a few moments. Good evening, everyone. My name is Johnny Keogh. I am the communications lead for the town of Innisfil, and I'm happy to welcome everyone watching this to our online event we're calling Ask a Planner, the Orbit. A few weeks ago, we did something similar appearing at the Innisfil District Association, so we got to thinking maybe we could try to organize something of our own. We haven't done anything like this before, so we thank you for your patience and understanding in advance. We apologize if there are any technical difficulties. I'm here at Innisfil Town Hall where there is a great internet connection, so hopefully there won't be any technical difficulties. The purpose of tonight is to provide you with the opportunity to ask questions about the orbit and learn more about it and the ministerial zoning order that will be going for council on November 4th. We'll be gathering your questions and incorporating them into that report. So here's how tonight will work. We will have a brief presentation about the report that's going before council. Then we will be taking your questions. So please leave your questions in the comment box here on YouTube. If you're watching on your mobile device, you may have noticed already that you cannot leave comments from your smartphone unless you download the YouTube app. So we recommend either downloading the YouTube app, switching to a computer, or you can simply email orbit@innisfil.ca. We have never done anything like this before, so just a few ground rules when using the comment box. The following is not permitted. Personal attacks, name calling, threats, and verbal abuse is not tolerated. Spam, please not flood the comment box with multiple messages that say the same thing. Messages promoting your business will be removed. Trolling, please avoid that. Stay relevant and on topic. If you purposely try to derail things or post inflammatory comments, they will be removed and you will be at risk of being suspended or banned. Racism, sexism, and other discrimination is not allowed. Illegal activities, not allowed. Do not make libelous statements or comments that include false or unsubstantiated allegations. If the legality of a comment is in question, it will be removed. Pardon me. Offensive usernames. If your username includes words that are offensive or abusive, your account will be blocked. A friendly suggestion when using the comment box, we want to try to get to as many different people as possible. So we're going to answer one question at a time per person. Then when we get through everyone, we will come around again and do another round of answers to your questions. Also, it'd be really cool if we could hear actually where in Innisfil you are. So if you're able to start your comment to, with something like, "Hi, it's Mark here in Stroud," that will be great because to us, the most important thing is hearing from Innisfil residents. We are scheduled to go to 7:30, so this is very important. If by any chance we do not get to your question tonight, everything that is being sent is being captured and recorded and will be included and addressed in the staff report that's going before council on November the 4th. There's a link in the description on this YouTube live stream to our Get Involved page. If you think of anything you'd like to ask tomorrow, in a couple of days from now, please go ahead and let us know there no later than end of day October the 26th. I'm going to introduce our guests. We have Director of Growth, Tim Kane, our Manager of Land Use Planning, Mary Nordstrom, and you can't see them, but there are additional staff from the communications and community engagement team who are just behind the scenes helping us. We also just want to acknowledge the mayor and council and thank them for their support in putting this night together. And now I'm just going to turn it over to our presenters. Sorry, Tim, you are on mute. Sorry, yep.
Yes, thank you. You think I would know better by now, but
no, it's going to happen tonight. It's okay.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We certainly appreciate getting the community's input and seeing us after hours and spending more time with us and trying to discuss this exciting topic for the town that's been in the community for quite some time and continues to be implemented, and certainly we would like to get comments along the way. To that effect, the idea tonight is to ask the public questions about the draft MZO. That was released to council last Wednesday for information to the community to start getting input on that planning tool that we're looking at using to implement the orbit through a ministerial zoning order request to the minister. Council last Wednesday night, for those of you who weren't aware or weren't watching, council did decide to use that tool that's available to them under the Planning Act to request a ministerial zoning order from the minister and the province. So they've since directed staff to do that. That request has been sent into the minister, letting him know that the request is being made by the town, or the town has made that request formally, and that the content of the MZO hasn't been decided yet until this round of consultation is complete and council's had a chance to look at that in a final version, in a final draft, before submitting that to both the county and to the province. Johnny, can you advance to the next slide, please? Thank you. With respect to timelines, this is a slide that was shown last Wednesday night as well, but it's a good summary of where we are to date. The GO station was discussed and introduced into the town back in 2005 through an environmental assessment process with Metrolink. So it's been part of the community and part of the community discussion for the last 15 years. And then in 2006, it started to be shown in the town's official plan. It's been shown in subsequent master plans like the 2012 Transportation Master Plan. And here we are now in more recent times. So back in May of last year, as we were doing the new official plan, and as the province was looking at establishing a new station in the town, we decided to issue an RFP, request for a proposal, to partner with a firm to help put that vision together, what a station in Innisfil could look like. In September, we started reaching out with the public through focus groups before presenting a vision, which Ms. Nordstrom will show to this group later on in the presentation. And that was adopted by council unanimously back in November last year. And since that time, a lot of work's gone on as well, especially with respect to the station and that center of mass, that area of development immediately around the station. That design process has moved forward. There was a community engagement process associated with that, and council ultimately endorsed that vision for the station and that surrounding use of land in July of this year. Fast forward, still engaging with the public through events like the Innisfil District Association. They were kind enough to invite us to their AGM. And ultimately now looking at tools to implement that vision that's been in the community for almost a year now, and looking at the tools was a topic of last week's staff report to council, looking at that tools that might be available for us to do that. And the preferred one from the staff's point of view was the ministerial zoning order, and council supported that request and ultimately sent that request into the minister. And here we are to talk about what that MZO can include, what the community would like to see in that, and how best to move this project forward. Next slide, please, Johnny. And on that note, as I mentioned, the request has gone in and the consultation's happening. That's what's happening now. What's next? Obviously, that ministerial zoning order is at the complete discretion of the minister. The town has no control over that process. The town has made its request known and sent that in. Additional content of that final MZO will be sent in to support that formal request that's already gone in November 2020. Right now, it's scheduled to go back to council on November the 4th with a recommendation report. And then where do we go next? And the story is far from over. A lot of people think that the ministerial zoning order is the end of the consideration process. It's not by any stretch of the imagination. So there's still a lot of technical studies that have to deal with things like the environment and traffic and servicing that get worked out during detailed design of the station and that center of mass. And then also more importantly, is a secondary plan. So the MZO is only being asked for two things, and Mary's going to talk about that a little bit more. And what will happen outside that initial area of approvals through the MZO, if the minister does decide to grant that, will be a secondary plan to look at the much longer term vision and the wider area moving forward. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mary to take over. Next slide, please, John.
Thank you, Tim. So now we'll be taking you unpacking the draft MZO that was attached to last week's council report. And while quite technical in its wording, it's actually quite a unique MZO that has been drafted that is a hybrid and innovative in that it marries together the principles and visions of the orbit that have been discussed publicly over the past year, together with some of those regulations more typically found in MZO. So staff have been working hard and collaborating with our stakeholders to bring you what we see as a document that really translates the orbit vision, and we'd like to walk you through that tonight and seek your and look forward to your comments on what can be strengthened or added to that MZO. So in the numbers that we've placed here, you can see at the bottom the letter I, the number 1. What that number 1 is doing is that boundary that is established in the draft MZO that sets that ultimate vision of the major transit station area as encompassing that entire area. And the I being that major transit station area that is defined in the draft MZO. And then that number 17 is denoting those lands that Tim referred to earlier as going through the secondary plan process. So it is in the draft MZO described as being land for future development and only permitted through the policies and regulations determined through that secondary planning process. The O that runs through the center, the dark O, denotes that linear park. It's also described in the MZO that runs both through the concentric yellow circles that have development, transit-oriented development provisions in there, as well as beyond, as that multi-use trail along a rail corridor that would provide for alternative transportation to the center through bicycles, through pedestrian walking, as well as public arts, outdoor seating, weather protection. And then moving into where the yellow circles are, there's 3 circles there, and the number 8 being at the center is the regulations in the MZO that speak to that station itself, as well as the public plaza immediately surrounding it to activate the station, as well as those 4 to 8 mixed-use buildings that would be concentrically located around that station that provides that massing public realm and sustainability elements that are discussed in the MZO. That is the center of mass that we will unpack further in the presentation. But then moving out to the second ring, you can see that there's numbers 3, 10, numbers 3, 10, and 15 in there. So that number 3 is referencing where that MZO speaks to streets, parks, and streets, parks, and blocks in the master plan that are consistent with the vision and principles. And then number 10 is setting out those, it sets out requirements in the draft MZO that speak to meaningful indoor cultural spaces within each quadrant. And the quadrants are created through that concentric circle and the railway intersecting with the 6th line. And then number 15 denotes where the densities that are established in that ring being a minimum of 200 residential units per hectare, as well as building typologies, mixed-use buildings, perimeter buildings, forms of gentle density to be achieved in that ring. And then moving into the 3rd ring, the draft MZO actually proposes phasing policies that seek to establish that the center of mass and that 225-meter ring, those first 2 rings, that there's substantial development either through building permits or site plan approval within those inner circles for a substantial amount of residential and non-residential uses and developments, including cultural spaces, public spaces, before moving out to the development of that outer ring. And the MZO sets forth reduced residential densities of 150 units per hectare and non-residential land use requirements, as well as introduces permissions for townhouses, laneway suites, heritage dwellings, and other residential forms. In all of those 3 circles, there's minimum requirements for affordable residential units, and as well as requirement for parkland. So moving on to the next slide. Thank you. So this slide digs into a closer look into that center of mass. And again, these numbers I'll walk through just to indicate that the MZO is capturing this vision. So with the number 8 and the letter F is again where the draft MZO is saying that there is a station, a requirement for a station to be built right at the center. And not only does that station include track work and platforms, but it also includes requirements for trail connections and active community uses, which is consistent with that orbit vision. And number 4, denoted just to the left of the number 8 station, that captures the public plaza, which is a minimum 5,000 square meters, or for those who think in square feet, 54,000 square feet. And it's a large public plaza intended to activate that station and has requirements in the draft MZO for public art and outdoor seating, green infrastructure, weather protection elements, and various regulations that require indoor and outdoor retail and market uses. It really is and allows for transient as well as like fixed uses to pop up, community engagement, as well as looking at the public plaza through a pandemic lens, including public cleansing stations, and really with the range of uses that are set forth in that through that public plaza regulations is the intent of creating this heartbeat to the orbit. It activates it and creates a placemaking foundation for the orbit. As well, number 6, moving on to number 6, this is where the draft MZO also requires that there be a minimum 1,500 square meters or 16,000 square feet of community space. And that can be library or similar indoor cultural use, as well as contiguous outdoor active weather protected outdoor uses. Again, that goes to the activation of that center of mass. And then number 13 here is highlighting where in the draft MZO we're capturing non-residential floor uses, non-residential floor spaces that are designed to be flexible. So there's flex spaces designed to be spatially, electrically, digitally flexible, flexible floor plans and connections to accommodate a range of uses, range of users and uses that can activate that public plaza and that center of mass. And then number 7 is assigned to those 4 to 8 buildings I referred to earlier being those mixed-use buildings centrically arranged around and anchoring the station and that public plaza. And through the image, you see the stratified vegetation on the different levels and facades of those buildings. That's also being captured through the draft MZO. And the number 5 and O again is picking up on that linear park and the range of public spaces and outdoor spaces and parks that are also being regulated through that draft MZO. Moving on to the next slide. This is a look at the center of mass from the another vantage point. And the letter A and the number 14 is where in the draft MZO there are provisions put in place, definitions and requirements that a certain component of the non-residential uses that you see on that track and street level are required to be active uses. Again, going to that heart of the orbit and ensuring that the space is activated. As well, in that same space and denoted by the letter S is where there's a range of non-residential uses and office amenity spaces that are to be located within the buildings within that center. And it include those, include the idea of having communal office amenity spaces as an opportunity for Innisfil residents to work from Innisfil. Again, and the letter B, it was capturing as a definition within the Minister's zoning order for affordable housing. And why it's being placed here on this image is that affordable housing requirement, be it rental or ownership, is integrated within the buildings and within every ring. And the number 9 that you can see by the bus, the blue bus there in the right-hand corner, is that there's a requirement for active uses, not only at the street level, but also at the track level. Moving on. And this slide is a look at beyond the center of mass and beyond that sort of 125 and 225 meter radius of the station is a transitioning of the residential permissions and non-residential land use permissions from a minimum building heights in the center of 6 stories to a minimum building height of 4 stories within that outer ring, and also introduces other residential built forms like townhouses, laneway suites, and heritage dwellings at a lower residential density of 150 units per hectare. And the letters A and D and H are all regulations and definitions set up in the draft MZO to continue to have active, flexible, non-residential uses, including live work units beyond that center of mass, including within but beyond. And each quadrant within that outer ring requires a minimum non-res GFA or gross floor area of 10,000 square feet, as well as the continued requirement for affordable housing ownership or rental integrated within the buildings within that ring. That captures what we will do, these letters and these numbers that we've put out here. We will assign these to the draft MZO that went along with the council report last week, so that you can cross-reference between the images denoted and the letters and numbers denoted on the images here with that draft MZO and see how that draft MZO is capturing the vision. With that, I turn to you, Tim, for the next slide.
Thanks, Mary. And just to wrap up, the other part of the MZO that is fairly unique to what Innisfil has drafted and what we're seeking input on are the orbit principles. And those are based around environmental sustainability. How do we reduce water demand? How do we maintain urban forest or enhance urban forest? Protect the natural features, which we know is a common theme as we hear various inputs from the community. Waste reduction, green building standards, reducing greenhouse gas use, and obviously alternative transportation. With respect to resilient design, as Mary mentioned, we're looking for flexible and adaptive spaces. We're looking for, different ways to handle stormwater events that are becoming more and more frequent in their intensiveness. And, what we're learning from COVID right now in terms of being more ready for challenges that face the community moving forward. Cultural sustainability is another large one, and the well-being of our community, and that has a direct relationship to resilient design. And that's the placemaking piece that we've preached about a fair bit in various reports to council over the years. Curated public spaces that support mental and social health as well. Again, critically important. And then the technology side. Technology doesn't cure all our ills, but certainly there are niggling problems that we've traditionally, or the municipalities traditionally have had to deal with. And to be quite honest, there are better ways to address those using technology. So how do we do that? How do we use a smart grid and digital infrastructure and data governance to protect privacy as Orbit attempts to embrace technology to help it thrive and grow and set a precedent for the rest of the community. Innovative and inclusive. Inclusivity is obviously very important given recent events, and that's something that Orbit will seek to do. We'll do that through flexible spaces, planning for a human scale, and another key component is the affordable housing piece as well. And then the economic acceleration. Jobs are important to this town. The economy is changing quite rapidly. There are economic development initiatives right now that will benefit from having Orbit in play, and will support small business startups and pop-up opportunities and having spaces as businesses are changing, which we're seeing quite rapidly through recent events. So on that note, I believe that wraps up the formal part of the presentation. What hasn't been discussed will certainly form the basis, or can certainly form the basis of questions moving forward. And Mary and I are here to answer those as best we can.
Thanks, guys. Everyone just bear with us. We're watching multiple screens, seeing lots of activity. It's great to have all these questions coming in. As promised, we'll go to the first round that we got from the emails. So the first one comes from Stephen Kirschenblatt. Why is this change to our new official plan being initiated by the town?
I'll take that one, Johnny. Thank you for the question. The Orbit vision is a growth model that's been supported by council, both through the official plan and the community strategic plan for quite some time now. And as we said before, and as we said last week, it's a chance for Innisfil to grow on its own terms and protect those characteristics of the community that we hear are most important. That being our rural open spaces and that being our existing neighborhoods. So we'll continue to do that. Whether it's an MZO or otherwise, the idea is that Orbit will be implemented through the town and whatever planning mechanisms are required to do that, because those directions have been given to us. The new official plan does recognize the GO station and the higher density around it, and certainly the Orbit vision builds on that, and the subsequent planning approvals will also build on that. Thank you.
Thanks. Next question comes from Megan Varga. Is this a waste of our time since the resolution was amended at the meeting to ask for the MZO, meaning it is already done and will be requested, or does council have a chance to change their minds?
Thanks, Johnny. I'm happy to answer this. Thank you, Megan, for the question. Is it a waste of time? It's never a waste of time. The additional resolution from last week's meeting was that council decided to use that MZO tool available to them, so that the focus of tonight's discussion and the days ahead is that we can focus on the consultation of the content and the details of the MZO as we've gone through in the presentation tonight, so that we can ensure that we are implementing that vision to the best of our abilities. So council does have the option to change their minds through a reconsideration vote, but we hope that we're able to focus in on the content and details of that MZO. Thank you.
Thanks. Moving along, from Leslie Pollock, the MZO would bypass all of the environmental assessments and studies required to protect Lake Simcoe. What recent studies have been undertaken to ensure that Lake Simcoe will be protected?
I can start that question, or start that answer, Johnny. The MZO doesn't bypass all the environmental assessments that are required to protect Lake Simcoe. The Lake Simcoe Protection Act applies to those site plan applications that we talk about that actually review detailed design and require background studies. So the environment will be considered through that, and the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan still applies, as well as the requirements of that to those site plans in those applications. In terms of recent studies to ensure the lake is protected, there haven't been any recent studies most recently. As people on the call or in the Zoom may realize that this part of Alcona has been planned for urban development for quite some time. There's quite a large amount of background information with respect to the environment and stormwater and hydrogeological functions in that area. Certainly those are going to be looked at and updated as required as this moves forward.
Thank you. First one from our YouTube chat comes from Bart Bagley. Will development of the orbit accelerate the 6th line cloverleaf or on-off ramps?
I can take this one too. The short answer is yes. How quickly, we don't know just yet, but the orbit ultimately will require a regional connection to the 400 series highway. And certainly as traffic volumes go, that will be evaluated through the first transportation studies that are done, just to nail down that date and ensure that interchange is there as required. But certainly, as you can imagine, with additional population being contemplated by orbit, the timing of that interchange has moved up from what was originally proposed in that first transportation master plan, and will form a key part of connecting the orbit to Highway 400.
Thank you. Next question from our YouTube chat, submitted by Claire Malcolmson. Within the MZO area, will the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, provincial and municipal natural heritage protection policies, the Clean Water Act be required? And will Innisfil ensure that's written into the MZO?
Thanks, Johnny. I can answer that one. So thanks, Claire. As alluded to already by Tim, yeah, the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, as well as other provincial policies, continue to apply through the site plan review process and the detailed studies that would come in with that. And so most certainly the site plans will need to, the development will need to comply with the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan and other provincial policies as well. There will be the secondary planning process that will capture these lands and the larger lands that will be further looking into and providing policy framework for the natural heritage protection of the lands in this area.
Thank you. Next question comes from, pardon me, just looking around here, from Rod Boynton. What happens to developers who own land in Alcona, example, north and south of 9th line? Are they now out of the official plan or lose their place? Example, Pratt.
Thank you, Johnny. I can have a crack at answering this one. The other areas of growth in the town are still intended to go ahead. One of the directions, or part of the direction from council when we were looking at the long-term growth of the town, was to continue to have appropriate growth within our existing settlement areas. It's not growth in orbit above all else by any stretch of the imagination. So, those areas of the town, including around the 9th line, that have been contemplated for growth previously, they'll continue to be contemplated for growth and will be considered during the county's review of growth in the town, called the Municipal Comprehensive Review, the MCR process. So as part of the MCR process, those other areas of town that are outside of orbit will remain to be considered, and the orbit will be recognized, potentially be recognized as a major transit station area and have its own growth associated with that, but not at the expense of all other areas within the town.
Thanks, Tim. Next question in our YouTube chat from Stephen Kirschenblatt. Would the town be open to a design review panel consisting of senior urban design planners, architects, and engineers?
I'll take that one too, just because I have been working on the governance model or the structure for that secondary plan process. Obviously, we welcome and invite all experts and academics, public and private, to help with our working groups, and especially local ones as well. This has been a desire for us, is that we have a lot of qualified people within the community, and by all means, we are looking at various committees or steering groups to look at those various topics of orbit to help us with these decisions along the way as that secondary plan process unfolds.
Thanks, Tim. This is a neat one. I haven't heard this before. Curious to know how the orbit plans to attract immigrants and technical talent to the area, or if the focus is on local residents.
Thanks, Johnny. I can take a crack at it. It's an interesting question. So the MZO and the plans for the orbit are certainly to attract talent and people from within and beyond Innisfil, as we look to accommodate more growth around our transit station, and hope that the basis of this being a progressive vision and based on the sustainability and a walkable community, and designed and intended to be one of amazing and a world-class place to live, that we will be attracting folks from various diverse backgrounds, experiences, and creeds, and want to welcome all into this community.
Great. Our next question comes from Stephen Fishman. What's the maximum number of floors for the surrounding buildings in the center of Mass?
Thank you, Johnny. Right now, those images show, I think, around 24 stories in those vision documents that Mary showed. The idea is not to have hyperdensity, as they call it, really tall towers. We are trying to, have what we call soft density, that is, a little more easier to build a community around, rather than other examples that we've seen globally. So the idea is to have modest high-rise buildings at around 20 to 24 stories around that center station. And then gradually reduce in height from that, and that's reflected in the MZO as drafted. Right now, with those buildings in the middle and that lower density or lower building heights beyond those initial 4 to 8 buildings around the core, there's a population of about 20,000 people proposed within that first 425 meters as it's proposed at the moment.
Great, thanks. Next one comes from Christine M. Will this project be bypassing environmental laws governed by the Conservation Authority? Will residents also be allowed to get permits for second dwelling for second dwellings during a grace period? Do you repeat that, or did that come? I know I fumbled my way through that. Did that come across okay?
Thanks, Johnny. Well, one part of the question is about bypassing environmental laws, of which that is not being done here. The lands will be looked at the granular level, as you would do through a site plan process, with the technical studies and review that would typically be required for that. So from that standpoint, no, there's no, the orbit and the draft MZO is not seeking to bypass the environmental laws or the involvement and authority of the Conservation Authority. In terms of second dwellings, the province does allow for 4 second dwellings. So depending on the build form and like the draft MZO is allowing for, laneway suites as an example of second dwellings. It does capture that through one of the concentric rings where laneway suites are considered. As well, the draft MZO has been drafted to have flexible floor plates in the residential, the higher density residential or mixed use buildings to allow for families of all sizes and types. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks. Next up from Megan Varga, raising concerns about COVID and the plaza, who's going to occupy that plaza, talking about Friday Harbor. How is the town going to get that plaza occupied? I'm guessing that plaza that we've seen in the images on the ground level on the GO, where the station level.
Thanks, Johnny. Yeah, so the 20,000 population I just mentioned within that first 400 meters, what we know and what we've heard through the marketplace and through economics is that first 10,000 people really helps. It is key to sustaining a lot of those services within that first stage, within that center of mass. So we're working towards that time frame. Yes, COVID is changing things quite rapidly. We've seen some businesses do quite well. We've seen other businesses not do so well. So the idea, particularly with the flexible spaces that are defined and included in that draft MZO, is to make those spaces as flexible as possible. So, whether it's pandemic or other community challenge, economic or otherwise, the idea is that those spaces can adapt and meet the needs of those people in those commercial spaces, and those people and those services that the community still needs. So, the idea of this walkable 20-minute community whereby a lot of services can be accessed, that's key for Orbit and that resiliency piece. And studies have shown during COVID that those types of communities that are walkable and have local services and curbside pickup are faring much better than traditional suburban models. And that's what we're trying to replicate in this draft. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Another question from Stephen Kirschenblatt. What assurances do we have that a developer wants to build this? Will the developer speak tonight? Well, it really is just us planning staff, communication staff here tonight. We're here for you to absolutely answer any of these questions. So I think we can take on that question. What assurances do we have that a developer wants to build this?
I can take that one, Johnny. As you mentioned, the developer won't be speaking tonight. The developer has been a key part of this process. As part of the Orbit visioning process, they were present. During that for council's initial endorsement of the vision. There were binding agreements put in place then to support the vision and move it forward. There are going to be additional agreements with that developer, including the site plan and development agreements to ensure that this takes place as it's intended. So the developer continues to be a partner in this. There have been commitments made, and there will be commitments continue to be made as this is implemented, and the legal agreements are required to do that.
Thanks, guys. Just bear with me 1 second here. I'm just trying to find the next question here. Sorry about that. If I've got this right, question from Bar Bagley: is sanitary sewer service or water plant design and capacity for this development going to be built to service and accommodate the most recent MZO?
Yes, I'll answer this one just because I've been a bit more involved in the engineering than Mary has. The short answer is yes. There is an existing environmental assessment approval for that plant for 2 more stages of expansion. That first stage of expansion is currently in the design phase right now to accommodate growth both within the town and those first phases of Orbit. And then the second stage of that expansion will also feed a lot more of the Orbit project. So there is capacity for the Orbit, not that ultimate capacity, obviously, because this is a 50 to 60 year plan, but certainly what's being proposed by the MZO would be accommodated by the existing plant and that environmental assessment already in place.
Thanks, Tim. Next question comes from Kaylee Robbins. How does the town intend to ensure that it receives an allocation from the county through its MCR if the MZO goes through? And maybe for those of us who didn't go to planning school, just take a moment to explain what an MCR is, just because probably a lot of people are not going to be familiar with that term.
Thanks, Johnny. The MCR is a municipal comprehensive review that under the provincial policies require that you look at your population and land areas every few years and set those parameters within your county plans, and then implement them within your local plans in terms of a growth management strategy, both in terms of residential and employment. So it's a big planning exercise that looks at where growth is to go over the coming years, so that you can plan for infrastructure and policies to accommodate that growth. And so the county's municipal comprehensive review has recently been initiated, and to look at that. So that's for the entire growth across the entire county. And through that, the county, in terms of the role that the county has played with the MZO, they have been one of the stakeholders that we have been reaching out to in drafting of the minister's zoning order, as well as we're reaching out to the province as well to ensure that the population numbers for the orbit lands are accommodated through that MCR process and recognized as a population that is unique to the opportunities afforded by the GO station and the growth plan provincial policies that seek for growth around transit stations. So I think that answers the question.
Thanks, Mary. So next one comes from Leslie Pollock. What is the plan when it comes to zoning, rezoning for the lands on 6th line west of 20th Side Road to the 400? When is an interchange plan for the 400 and 6th line, and who is going to be paying for that construction?
I'll take that one just because there's some engineering involved in that one, Johnny. So the MZO isn't proposing any uses west of the 6th line at this point in time. That 425-meter radius doesn't extend out to the 20th Side Road. It ends before that. The orbit boundary that is proposed as part of the MZO does slightly go west of 20th along the 6th, and that's just to allow for servicing along the 6th line to get the best bang for a buck and what they say double load, or allow servicing to occur from both sides of that infrastructure along the 6th line. West of that is a much longer term question beyond the orbit vision and hasn't been contemplated. We're purely focused right now with this MZO on that first 425 meters, and secondly, just establishing that long-term boundary that right now is just slightly west of the 20th on the 6th line. With respect to the 6th line interchange, this was similar to the question that we had by our former Mayor Bagley earlier. We're not sure the exact timing of that yet. It is likely within the next 10 years, but that will be determined as the studies and the market uptake occurs at the orbit, and that need is demonstrated and required. In terms of who's going to pay for its construction, like any other major infrastructure projects associated with growth, those are funded through development contributions. So the cost of that interchange would form part of our background study and be included in the development charges that are paid by builders to pay for new infrastructure.
Thanks, Tim. And just a note, just given we are seeing lots and lots of questions, which is great, which means people knew this was coming and they came here to actually listen to this and ask some questions. We can extend this past, I think I said 7:30, so we can go beyond that to try to get as many as we can. And so we're here, we want to try to get as many as we can. So the next question comes from Roro. Is the developer paying for the sewer and waste treatment expansion cost?
I can answer this one, Johnny. The sewer expansion cost, as I mentioned before about the bridge, those are included in development charges. So new development has to pay for the expansion of that plant because we wouldn't need the expansion of that plant if it wasn't for growth. So we've heard the expression many times that growth pays for growth. That's the theory of it. So that new plant expansion will be paid for by the development community. What is a little different and what's been the subject of most recent discussions with the development community is that they will be front-ending. That's what we call, they will be paying the money up front to get credits later, but they will be paying the money up front for that expansion to occur, so the town doesn't have to wear as much debt burden to construct that plan.
Thanks, Tim. Next one from, I missed this one actually in the wrong order, but Joy Adams. This project sounds like quite an undertaking. Will it be rolled out over a number of years? Will the builders commit to the entire project?
Thanks, Johnny, and thanks, Joy, for the question. So the project is quite an undertaking, and that is why the draft MZO has been established in phases, recognizing that the initial development and investment needs to occur at that center where the station is, and the sort of center of mass to support that station before moving out into those outer rings. and allowing for that secondary plan process to plan for the broader area. So certainly there is, as we've already discussed, there is a commitment from the developer to construct within the MZO land, so the initial 425 meters. When we go outside of that 425 meters, and we're capturing through the secondary plan process, but and working with a number of different builders. But yeah, so certainly it is an undertaking, and the draft MZO, we believe, has been developed in a way that captures that and phases it out while still ensuring that those key parts of the vision are being captured in each phase and each quadrant of these orbit lands.
And just to build on Mary's answer as well, is that, the whole, why, another reason that an MZO is being looked at right now is that, we really want to capture, what the spirit and essence is of the mobility orbit. So, the better job we do of that by having, that first round of development around that station will go a long way to setting the tone for the orbit vision. So we feel that this first chunk of development around the station is critically important, and will set the tone and the excitement and create a new market. Not a new market as in the town new market, but create a new market for Innisfil and keep that momentum going as orbit continues to develop.
Thanks, guys. Interesting question from Morgan M. Is there any plan to provide modular design and culture as new community members get attracted to the region through time? And maybe just explain in a minute what modular design is for those of us like me who don't know.
Thanks, Johnny. So yeah, the orbit, the vision behind the orbit is really one of resiliency and adaptability and inclusivity, as we pointed out in the presentation. And so we have looked to ensure there is modular design is picked up through the site plan process that's required through that draft MZO, ensuring that not just what you typically see being those flex spaces that are designed in a way to be flexible for a range of different users, sort of on a dime, both in terms of, multiple ways, electrically, spatially, digitally, but also we've looked for that modular design within the residential component as well, to ensure that we're planning most optimally for those community members as they come online. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Interesting. Will there be an RVH branch incorporated into the plans for the orbit?
Thanks, Johnny. Yes, RVH is obviously a key community partner, and there has been talk recently of a South Campus for that. Whether or not the population I mentioned would be enough to attract RVH to the orbit hasn't been determined yet. Certainly, we would love RVH to be part of our community, regardless of where they're located. But if there's an opportunity to include them in the orbit, certainly we will be looking at that. If it's not a new campus, which is a pretty big investment, as you can imagine, certainly, much like we've seen recently with the Rosardo Health and Wellness Center, RVH can have a presence in the community in other ways. So, by having those community spaces and flexible spaces included in the design, it gives the opportunity for smaller and more nimble medical outpost or wellness uses to be included throughout that secondary plan and throughout that initial phase of the orbit. So long story short, yes, we'd love them to be part of the orbit, whether that's factoring into their new campus process is yet to be seen, but at the same time, we'll continue to provide smaller flexible spaces within the orbit design in the meantime.
Thanks, Tim. Question from Talopi Osho. When will the GO station be completed? It looks like we did respond in the chat and say that our best hope is that we're hoping for 2022. You guys want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, so I can just I can clarify that, Johnny. We need a target to aim for, and what we're doing, in discussions with the province and the county and the developer, we are aiming for a construction start date of 2022. Obviously, we'd like to move that up if we can, but given the complexity of this, the date we're looking for constructing is in 2022, and if we can move it up by all means, we'll do that. But that's the date we're working towards, and it's just a date. Given the complexities involved, we'll try and hold that wherever we can, and we'll update the community as we get more and more known about that start date.
Thanks. A question from Cynthia. What assurances are there that the developers will follow through with the plan?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the draft MZO has been drafted with the requirement that there be the master planning for each quadrant within the sort of center of mass and beyond within that 425 meters, and then follow through the detailed site plan approval process that still rests with the town to ensure that the development is hitting the requirements that have been captured in the draft MZO.
Thanks, Mary. Question from Todd Canning. He says that he lives at the 6th line and St. John's Road. How will the area around my home, which is I think he means how will my home, how will the area around my home, which is near the end of 6th line, near the water's edge, be affected?
Thanks, Johnny. That area, as described, would fall outside of the 425 meters. So what that means, the MZO would establish that development close to the station sooner. That area described in that vicinity, there'd be development out there at a later date in that orbit vision. So what would happen to guide development in that outer area? A key part of that in establishing what that might look like is the secondary plan process. So hopefully Todd is able to participate in that secondary plan process when we reach out and look at what that longer term use is, particularly in those areas where they're closer to the lake and whereby we want to integrate orbit with the existing neighborhoods sensitively as well. Those discussions are going to be quite helpful to get people's feedback on and help connect orbit to the lake and interfacing with those existing neighborhoods.
Okay, next question comes from Aaron Smith. I think you'll like this one. Is there any sustainable architecture or sustainable design being incorporated into the development?
The sustainability is at the core of the vision for the orbit that we have attempted to capture in that draft MZO through the orbit principles that are set out, as well as the appendix to the MZO, including the requirement for the greening of buildings, green building standards. There's varieties in which mechanisms within which we will be seeking sustainable architecture as well as sustainable design, reduced water demand, urban forests, protection of features, alternative transportation. So there's various ways, but yes, at the core of the draft MZO and the core of the orbit vision is sustainability, environment, architecture, and beyond.
Thanks, guys, and just bear with me, just catching up. You guys are answering faster than I can get to the questions sometimes. Just bear with me. I'm just going to grab the next one. If I can find it here. Sorry about that, everybody.
So, but Johnny, just to add on to that, my previous answer, if in reviewing that you have suggestions or comments to add to the draft MZO, would be obviously very interested in hearing that and to email that to the Orbit email. Yeah, it's at the core of the Orbit vision. Thank you.
Thanks. So as promised, we're coming back to the email questions that we got originally. So this one from Stephen Kirschenblatt. Please confirm that the growth in population over the next 10 years can be accommodated within the current settlement areas. The Orbit and MZO are not required to meet INISFO's growth commitments.
I can answer that one, Johnny. Yeah, the county land budget does show that the town's growth as previously projected can be accommodated within the existing settlement boundaries. A couple things would change that, obviously, and that's what we're looking at. The first of those changes would be that the town hasn't had a transit station before, and that's obviously going to shift timelines and market and demand for within Innisfil. So at some point, and probably through that municipal comprehensive review process that we described earlier, that will need to be recognized by the county and possibly change the ability to accommodate those lands within the orbit in the settlement area as it currently sits. The second piece of that too is that the 2022 is coming quick, and if we start construction there, we're going to we're not going to have real population moving in there until 2023, 2024. We're almost halfway to 2031. So as that new transit station area gets recognized, this is us being prepared towards the end or closer to 2031, having that housing stock and having that housing supply in place to accommodate that new growth associated with transit station development that we're seeing throughout the Greater Toronto Area.
Thanks, Tim. Question, again, email from Megan Varga. Does the MZO bypass all environmental requirements for normal planning?
Thanks, Johnny. Yeah, as we've discussed here tonight, no, that certainly does not bypass environmental assessments and studies. They will continue to be required as they typically are across the town through the site plan process, as well as the secondary planning process.
Thanks. Coming back to Leslie Pollock, why does the town feel that an MZO is required to get a GO station built? When normal planning processes would allow for all stakeholders to partake and ensure that all processes are properly followed.
Sorry, I was looking for my unmute button. I took some time there. Public consultation prior to and during the pandemic revealed that the construction of the Innisfil GO station remains a high community priority. To help expedite this and to respond to this and to allow us to aim for a construction date of 2022, we feel the ministerial zoning order is the best tool to do that. So that's not to say that we're not, just because we're consulting outside of the Planning Act doesn't mean that we're not consulting with stakeholders. That's the purpose of this session tonight. We don't necessarily need a Planning Act regulation to tell us what the best way is to consult or engage with our community. So in that spirit, we are here, we are talking about this, and looking at all those other things that go with the station, in terms of affordable housing and further employment, that will have access to transit, which is key and is only being outlined or expressed to us more clearly now during these challenging times. And then furthermore, though an MZO can't be approved, the public will have a right through that upcoming secondary plan to appeal if they want then, and certainly through the through that process they'll be able to do that. Knowing sometimes that LPAT doesn't necessarily make the best decisions for communities as well, and that's a common theme, and something that's something to consider as well. The site plan processes as well, even though they aren't, regular site plan processes in terms of detailed design, can't be appealed either under the current Planning Act. But that's not to say that those site plan applications, won't be there for the public to look at and to provide comments on as we keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, guys. Back to Stephen Kirschenblatt. Does Barrie agree to this growth plan as it appears to interfere with their growth plans?
Barrie is aware of the Innisfil orbit plan and will continue to have discussions with them. Obviously the growth plans of Innisfil and Barrie are, look at, internally their respective boundaries. So orbit wouldn't interfere with the growth plan of Barrie, and similarly, Barrie's growth plans wouldn't necessarily interfere with orbit's growth plan as well. So, we'll continue to have those dialogue, not just with Barrie, but with the Bradfords and the New Techs, and certainly the county to help coordinate that growth in a coordinated manner and reflects things like major transit station areas and other features that affect growth, depending on where you are geographically. And at the same time, too, regionally look at, how we're going to service growth across Simcoe County, in particular, South Simcoe, that will feel the brunt of that next round of growth, including both Barrie and Innisfil. So these are discussions we're having actively, and the more discussions that we have, the better that we can all accommodate this growth that will be coming to South Simcoe and the Barrie area.
Thanks, Tim. A question from David Yu. Will there be changes to the closed landfill site on the 7th line and surrounding lands?
I'll take this one since Ms. Nordstrom has only been at the town for about 7 months now, or 8 months, I guess, and isn't aware of all these interesting spots that we have within the town. So yes, there is a closed landfill on the 7th line. It is west of the 10th line, and Orbit will not have any effect on the land uses around there or that former landfill site.
Thanks, Tim. From Morgan M, have you considered new forms of energy, renewables, solar, microreactors? Also, have you considered infrastructure or free mesh internet to that area?
Thanks, Johnny. Yes, so the draft MZO does look to alternative forms of energy, including renewables and solar, as part of capturing that sustainability cornerstone to the orbit. And I'm not familiar with free mesh internet, but certainly something that can be explored as the technology sustainability is another key element to the development of the orbit. Thank you.
And just to add to that as well, a key feature of the orbit that we don't want to lose sight of and are looking at to explore is the ability to service with district energy. So for those not familiar with it, the town of Markham has been successful at providing district energy, heating and cooling through a communal system to areas within a tighter geographic area. So Orbit is looking at this possibility as well, and through that district energy system, would also be elements that we can add on to that, such as smart grid and such as Wi-Fi access for all the residents within that area.
Thanks, guys. I was quickly Googling around trying to figure out what mesh internet is myself, just because I thought that sounds pretty neat. It sounds like it's like it's essentially free internet that people, free networks that people can access. I'm sure we're going to get comments afterwards correcting that, but thought it was pretty neat. From Leslie Pollock, has the SCDSB, SMCDSB been asked for feedback, concerns about it taking a long time to build a school, and by the time a school is built, it's overcrowded, and are schools being thought of early on in the orbit?
Thanks, Johnny. Certainly, we're working closely with our partners at the school boards in terms of identifying school sites for today's community as well as tomorrow communities, and what that might look like in the orbit, and opportunities for some sort of alternative design for schools within the orbit lands. So those discussions are ongoing, but certainly to be considered as this area develops in line with that orbit vision.
And just to add to that, we see schools as a key placeholder in complete community use. So before Ms. Nordstrom joined the town, we'd actually had discussions very early on in the visioning exercise with the school board to just help start to accommodate their needs as we were going through that vision exercise. And that's been included in there, and it's continued to be included in there. And as recently as today, it's almost as if someone is psychic, but as recently as today, the school board did submit formal comments with respect to the draft ministerial zoning order, and we will be meeting with them to see how we can facilitate not only school sites, but also the timing of those, because it is a longer process and it is key for a community of any type, especially orbit.
Thanks, guys. From Morgan M, I understand taxes can be paid in crypto in the area. So talk about the fact that we do at the town of Innisfil, you can pay for your property taxes absolutely using cryptocurrency. We are the first, I believe in Canada, perhaps the world to offer that. So interested to know more about, will other public services also be paid in blockchain-based technology? That's neat.
I can have a crack at this one, even though I'm not a financial guru by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly, what the idea of cryptocurrency and accepting that for taxes was to show that, Innisfil is, and will continue to embrace various options afforded by technology. And certainly moving forward, we understand that, for example, PayPal services can use cryptocurrency functions. So, if the town sees a demand for that and certainly provides our residents with a service and an easier service to pay, we'll certainly look at expanding that program.
If only we were so smart to bought up some Bitcoin years and years ago, right? When it was just coming up. Have any aforementioned tech companies stepped forward and pitched ideas or proposals?
I can tackle that one just because I've been involved in the project longer. In the early days, we were certainly looking, we certainly were looking at the Sidewalk Labs example in Toronto as ideas for orbit. That project has basically ceased given that it was scaled down in size so much. So there currently are no conversations, with tech companies. Obviously, we are continuing to have discussions with the Ubers of the world with respect to our transit service, and get their ideas on orbit and how to integrate demand-based transit, for example, and our communication platforms as well. So however, there are no other conversations with tech companies at this time, but certainly moving forward, and once we get that structure in place for the secondary plan and that steering committee in place, we will be actively looking for what next practice is and how to best embrace technology into the orbit vision.
Thanks, guys. Just bear with me. Just catching up. Barb C through email. How realistic is the path that extends out onto the lake? Our property is within the shoreline. That would be highly impacted.
Yep, thanks for the question. And in terms of the feature that extends out into the lake, that is outside of the draft MZO that we're looking at in that wider secondary plan area, but it was something that was looked at early on in the visioning of this areas, how to connect as part of the vision and complete communities, how to connect this community to the lake, and whether it be through a walkable path through the lake. But there aren't details on that, any details on that or plans for that in the immediate future, as that extends sort of well beyond the center of mass and draft MZO and secondary plan area that we're talking about tonight.
All right, and sorry, just bear with me. Just trying to. I know I'm a little bit behind here. You guys are answering fast, and I can get to them, but just bear with me here. 1 second. From Joy A, what type of population growth is expected to ensure feasibility of the orbit?
So I can have a crack at that one, Johnny. The developer is looking at growth quite closely, and for good reason. For them to make that infrastructure investment, they need some certainty that the market will follow and help them pay for that infrastructure. And that's another reason for the MZO that we talked about earlier, was to provide that certainty earlier on for the developer to make those investment decisions. So a long story short, developer feels that, based on what's happening in the GTA area at the moment, based on what the orbit can be, as I mentioned before, it has the opportunity to be a new market and a great example of how communities should grow. the feeling is the demand is there. And certainly, from a land use planning point of view, the Greater Toronto region is the fastest growing region in North America at the moment, and will likely continue to do so moving forward. So it's certainly not a question of if, it's a question of when. And certainly that initial phase of Orbit's development will likely will have that market supply there to ensure that first stage takes place, and then hopefully keep that momentum moving forward as it goes on.
Thanks. From Will S. Without the MZO, how much would the timeline be pushed back? Other than a quicker timeline, what does an MZO mean?
Thanks, Johnny. So starting first with what does an MZO, the MZO puts in place those regulations, standards, and permissions to secure the investment to get the station built, which really, with the station being at the center of the orbit and its vision from which the balance of that vision can be realized. Without a minister's zoning order, which is a tool available under the Planning Act, without that minister's zoning order, you're looking at timelines for a project of this size to be delayed somewhere in the area of, I think we were mentioning last week, in 5 to 7 or even 10 years. And we don't want to lose that momentum and that investment and the ability to realize this vision in the nearer term, especially given the economic and realities of the world we're living in today.
Thanks. Back to Stephen Kirschenblatt from email. Do you have any market studies showing people will buy a high-rise condo here when they have lots of choice elsewhere?
Thank you, Johnny. I can take that one. The short answer is no. We don't have any current market studies, and given how quickly the market is changing, and we've seen the demand shift, within the last 8 months because of COVID, I'm not quite sure how valuable they would be anyway. But what is understood though is that better designed communities and walkable communities and more resilient communities tend to be sought after more than other types of high density markets. So the developer is well connected with the market and understands the market. They have projects that are actively being marketed in the GTA area, and certainly they're bringing that expertise to Orbit. And I suspect that's informing their decisions about the investments that they're willing to make and build that GO station sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Tim. From Leslie Pollock via email, where are the plans, designs for the GO station? So I guess, where are they at right now, the plans and designs for the GO station?
Yes, so the station design team is working on those. Part of that process obviously is to engage the requirements of Metrolinx. And as I understand it, they are in the process of doing that and incorporating those needs into the design. So in order for construction to start, if we're aiming for that 2022 date, those station design plans will be finalized next year in consultation with Metrolinx. Similar to the vision that was identified and adopted by Council back in July 2015. Back in July 15th, sorry, 2020.
Thanks, Tim. From Josh E, is there any number? Is there any idea how many jobs could be created within the orbit?
That's a great question. We've been so the draft MZO certainly sets out minimum non-residential floor area requirements, some of which can be cultural space, and some of as well as some flex spacing, and as well as shared amenity office space. So we can look at that and give an estimate of what that number of jobs that could be created, and put that on the Get Involved website. I don't have an estimate of what that number is right now.
Thanks, Mary. That's a good reminder that everything that we're kind of working on, a lot of this is going to get integrated into the Get Involved page. We've been receiving questions, all week recently, and we are working on an FAQ with some responses to all those. So absolutely, that's a great one that we can add to that as well. So great reminder. Let's see here from Megan Varga. Will the GO station be built and operational prior to occupancy of any orbit unit? Is that I think the developer committed to this. Is this in the MZO?
I can help answer that one. Yeah, the idea is that the GO station in that first stage of development will be built concurrently. So the idea, and I think I may have mentioned before, but the idea though is just to clarify is that the station opening as well as those first occupancies will be occurring around the same time, and that makes financial sense as well, as developers relying on the sales of those units to help fund that station. So the idea is to link those two events together to ensure that those occupancies are occurring around the same time as the station opening.
Thanks, Tim. From Rob B in the YouTube chat, how has accessibility been integrated into the development of this plan?
Thanks, Johnny. That's a great question. So the design of the station itself and Metrolink's requirements would certainly accommodate for accessibility, as well as the site plan process that would follow the approval of the draft MZO would ensure that the plans for any of the uses and buildings and structures within the orbit are designed in accordance with the AODA, or the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, as well as the innovative and flexible and inclusive approach that we're taking within the orbit, that this remains something that will be looked at throughout the process, through the draft MZO through to the site plan approval and building permit stage.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that's certainly a role that the town's accessibility committee, as we mentioned, those various committees and steering groups to help guide the organizing process. There's no question that the accessibility committee will be key to help us maximizing those accessibility options moving forward.
Thanks, guys. From Donna R in the chat, how many train tracks are being planned for, other than the one that is there right now?
Thanks, Johnny. So Metrolinx they do have a rail expansion program that's underway to look at providing all-day two-way service north of Aurora within hopefully about 10 years, or around that 10-year window. So as part of that, the station design is very much aware of what the ultimate number of tracks that Metrolinx is planning for. So to answer the question, the number is 3. That would provide 2 tracks in either direction to give that all-day two-way service, plus a track in the middle that would allow potentially for express services or more flexibility for GO scheduling. So the station is being designed for 3 tracks ultimately, just so we don't lose that opportunity to make the most out of that regional infrastructure.
Thanks, Tim. From Leslie Pollock from email, what benefit do residents and the town receive for the developer building a GO station?
Thanks, Johnny. Well, there's endless benefits associated with a GO station being built without taxpayer dollars. Certainly opening up the connectivity of Innisfil to the sort of broader GTA area and beyond, as well as the cultural spaces that are envisioned for the plan, and the commercial, as well as the rail link park and the various elements of connectivity that are being designed and incorporated into this, that is really being ignited by that station. So that station is being built without impact to dollar impacts to the residents, but there are a list of benefits that Innisfil will enjoy by proceeding with this unique, world-class, innovative community.
Thanks, Mary. From email from Megan Varga, can we build a whistle stop for people to get in and off of Innisfil? So I guess instead of this, can we do a whistle stop instead of a station? I think that's what that means, a whistle stop. And if you don't, yeah, okay, thanks.
I think, John, I think the question just means, the bare bones type station where someone can just get on and off the train. Of course, that's an option, and that was the option that was previously being proposed by Metrolinx. And there's been quite some discussion at council about, yes, the town was accepting of that at the time because, we were getting a free rail station. The province is going to pay for that. But at the same time, though, it's, if we really want to grow and grow in a different way and grow in a way that embraces those principles, that we outlined in the presentation with respect to the environment and resiliency and culture and technology, how do we create that community hub for future? So, yes, we could build a whistle stop station whereby people get on and off. I think we've all been on the train and have seen people, literally, running to the last minute to catch that train and then running to get back to the cars after. And, we don't feel that is a good model. And certainly, within Metrolinx's own business case, they're recognizing that stations play a valuable role in the community as a focal point of neighborhood and as a community hub. So we don't want to lose that opportunity moving forward. And we're putting our best foot forward now with the station that's being proposed as part of the Orbit vision.
Thanks, Tim. From Donna R, how many parking spaces for the GO station will be provided?
Thanks, Donna, for the question. Metrolinx requirement is, I believe, 500 parking spaces for the GO station, but we're really trying to capture with that Orbit vision and the draft MZO that alternative modes of transportation be at the center of how and be the driving, pardon the pun, way that people move about the Orbit and not be car reliant. So we would hope to see improve that 500 parking spaces is too many in the future, but for this phase of the GO station, the Metrolinx requirement is for 500 parking spaces.
And just to add to that, that's the benefit of planning comprehensively now, right? So, where other stations where you have a sea of 500 parking spaces or more in some cases, and quite often not being enough parking because they keep getting catered for the car and not providing alternative transport options. By Orbit looking at this comprehensively, yes, there's 500 parking spaces in those early days as the community gets used to having a station and as our community becomes more walkable. And then the idea is that we can convert those parking spaces into much more valuable places for the community in terms of retail and even residential in some cases. So the idea is to provide that initial tranche of parking, but at the same time being able to amend and reuse and adapt those parking areas as the community changes over time.
Okay, thanks guys. Just give me 1 second here. Just maybe take a sip of water while I'm just taking a quick scan here. Just bear with me. Looks like just another question from Anya. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Have Innisfil residents been surveyed to see if the Orbit or the whistle stop is preferred? If so, what are the numbers and where can this be reviewed?
Yes, that's a good question, and it's nice that it builds on the previous answer. So soon after the Orbit vision was adopted by council back in November of last year, A survey was put online on the Get Involved website, and I believe, Johnny, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's close to 500 responses, certainly over 400 responses for that survey, whereby the community was asked what they'd like to see as part of that station. And that input was critical for us. That input went into the station design process and that vision that was adopted by council later in July of this year. So through that survey, and those survey results are available, I believe, in that as part of that staff report back in July 15th, and we can certainly post those on the Get Involved website again as well, just to reinforce that. But the community did speak out in quite a large number of what they'd like to see in that station, and you know, from what we could tell, by all means, it was to have a more integrated and future-proof station rather than one where you just simply get on and off.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Mary. Okay, the time is just about 8 o'clock. I think we're going to leave it there. So just want to say thank you to everyone who came out online or email, you know, to have this amazing discussion with us. It was great. I just want to say thanks to our amazing planners who just kept answering all the questions. It was great to have you guys. Keep going. Anything we weren't able to get to tonight, we will be addressing in the council report. So please, you can send us your questions via email. Even better is to visit our feedback website, getinvolvedinnisfil.ca /go, where you can leave comments and questions. We watch all those and we're responding to those. Again, the link for that is in the YouTube in the description. And again, the report will be going to before council on November 4th. If you would like to address council, there are instructions about that on our websites as well. And of course, we will be streaming that on YouTube as well. So be sure to check that out. Just want to say thank you to everyone again. Thanks for the interest. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for your patience and understanding as we you know, took a shot at this and did this little experiment. So we appreciate it. And have a great, safe night.